police in Las Vegas found themselves in the middle of a UFO mystery last month after
To us. Big eyes. They have big eyes.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal? Or?
One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious.
What sign? I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Okay, hang on.
He's right.
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
Mythical Legends Podcast with your host Daniel Barnett.
Welcome to the Mythical Legends Podcast. Today we have a very special guest from here in the UK. She is a founding member of the Being Believed Research and Investigations Group and a podcaster, Deborah Hatswell. Thank you for spending time with me today, Deborah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Daniel. And I know that you have a keen interest in the subject. So I think me and you getting together would make for an amazing podcast.
Yeah, it certainly will do. So, Deborah, where are you based?
I'm based in the northwest of England, Bolton, Lancashire. So not far from the coast. Not really what you'd expect to be Bigfoot or cryptid country until you start digging into some of my cases.
Yeah. Could you tell our listeners about your investigations and reports and how it got started and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. I didn't have an interest, actually, Daniel, I didn't really know the subject of cryptozoology, Bigfoot, dogman. I didn't know any of those things. I'd heard about UFOs, obviously, and, paranormal things. Back in 1982, there was no internet. And you had, 3 channels on the TV, so there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. And I would class myself as a really ordinary girl. I was at secondary school. It was the year we sat our exams. I was 15. And Salford, where I come from, is a very working class town. We have a pit, the docks, and mills, really. There's not a whole much more going off. And I decided to skip school with my friend. And when we would do this, we would go...
Not to do that, Daniel, by the way. Just,
don't do that, Daniel. You might see a monster. That was it. It was a cautionary tale on never, ever, ever playing truant. I never did again. And it was a lovely day. It was, I think, May, around about May time. It wasn't red hot summer, but it was a really nice day. And my school is very Harry Potter-esque. It was an old mansion that people used to live in. And in that area, back in the day, there was only 2 mansions, one of them being my school. And I'm talking back in the 17th century. And the other being a house called Hart Hill House. And that eventually turned into Bewlil House when the corporation bought the area. But there was nothing remarkable about it. I played in that park every day of my life, never experienced anything. And on this particular day, myself and my friend, there was a place that we would duck in at the side of the old mansion. And nobody lived in it then. It was kind of left to rack and ruin. And as the council do, they hadn't done anything with the gardens either. So they were incredibly overgrown. But for us children, it meant that if we ducked into the den, we could see out and see people going past through the rhododendrons, and the ivy and such. But you couldn't actually see in it. So it was a really good place for playing truant. And we were in there. We must have been in there an hour and a half. We were just giggling and talking as girls do. And I noticed a movement out the corner of my eye. And honestly, I thought it was going to be a teacher. I thought we're in big trouble now. He's just going to say, right, back to school. And unfortunately, to my horror, it wasn't. I came face to face, eye to eye, with a creature that I still find 45 years later really, really difficult to explain. He looked like a Neanderthal or a caveman, but much, much hairier. Mm-hmm. But he didn't look like a monkey either. He looked like a kind of a combination of early man, modern man, and the great apes. But I didn't know that back then, obviously. I'm an ordinary girl in an ordinary town. And if you walk out of your front door now and there was a gorilla in your garden, you would be absolutely astounded and probably run for your life.
Yeah.
You know, so I did something awful, which is the opposite of my personality. I actually was so frightened, I pushed my friend to the ground. I pushed her down and I ran. And I've always admitted that, because you got to tell the whole of the truth, haven't you? That's how frightened I was. It was primal for me, an absolute primal fear. He had a very pronounced brow ridge. And his skin was like almost leathery, like a man that worked outside all of the time. But I wouldn't say he was ancient. I don't think he was much older than we were. Very big, very muscular. And he didn't do anything to scare me, Daniel. He just looked at me and I looked at him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so shocking to see him that's, hence the reaction. People say to me, did he have like fangs? And I say, no, he had quite human-like teeth. Human lips, everything you'd expect really from a caveman, but much, much hairier.
Amazing. Now, what an experience to have.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if I put myself in that position, I would do what you did.
Yeah.
Run for my life, because that sounds, yeah.
There are certain times in your life when you will act on instinct. Say if somebody has an accident, or your car crash, you hear of people, don't you, lifting cars up and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never run that fast in my life before or since, and I have a period of missing time in that. I remember running away, and I looked back, Daniel, to see if he was following me, and my friend was running in the opposite direction. And he just leant back into the greenery and he was completely gone. You couldn't see him. And my next thought would probably be about 1 mile, 2 miles down the road. There's quite a busy road called the East Lancashire motorway here. And I remember coming to a stop there and thinking, I can't run over the field. If I run over the field, they will be in there. And that kind of left me with is he real? Did I imagine it? Was it an hallucination, But too frightened to go back. It took me 35 years to go back to that spot, that exact spot. And I did that with the Finding Bigfoot team in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he was probably about 7 feet tall. But what was fantastic for me, Daniel, many, many years later, about 25 years later, a lady from my town got in touch with an American cryptozoologist, Thomas Markham, who runs a crypto crew. And she said that I think I saw the same thing. I was in my town. People would say, "Oh, that's that girl who sees monsters." It was just awful. It was a really awful period of my life. But she came forward to say that she knew about it at the time, but she was too frightened to also admit that she'd seen him. And she saw him. I saw him in 82, and she saw him in 84. And she saw all of him, all of his body. I only saw him from
Wow.
Yeah, so she said her description of him. She said he looked like an ape, a chimp and a man pushed together. He had a pot belly, kind of a haunch on him. He was clearly male, and he just stood there and looked at her. He didn't do anything. He didn't try to get her or anything like that, but she was as frightened as me. And she was walking the dog at the time. She grabbed the dog and she ran out of there. But that was a huge amount of validation for me.
And Deborah, what did your family say?
Yeah, you can imagine this northern family. My parents are working class. I run in. I'm crying and snot everywhere without being awful. And Mum says, "Get upstairs and get your uniform off now before your dad gets in." That was all the counselling I got. So I honestly went upstairs and just lay on my bed and cried and cried and cried. When Dad came home, because he worked shifts, my mum said, "I think somebody's hurt our Deb. I think something's happened to her in the park. She won't speak to me about it." So Dad came upstairs and he obviously thought that it was a man, a human male. And I said to him, "No, Dad, I've seen something." And it was a man, it was an ape, I don't know what it was. And he believed me. He did believe me because he said he knew when I was lying, it was my dad. And I was quite a forthright girl. I wasn't really scared of anything. I was quite raised kind of to be tough, really. So for my dad to see the fear that was in me, he opened up to me many, many years later, and he said that when he was in his early 20s, only about, I'd say, half a mile from the park, he saw what he described as a black dog, a very thick, muscular black dog that had yellow eyes. And I wondered if maybe there was something about that land that people were experiencing these strange activities. And the last report I took from there, Daniel, was in 2021.
Wow.
And
is this just in the middle of fields?
it's kind of like a country park, now surrounded by houses, obviously. But back then, it wasn't the kind of place that you would expect to see a Bigfoot. I can't say in any way, shape, or form that you would see something like him there. But that's what got me started. I think I had all these questions myself. Would he come back being the first one? Would I see him again? And I was absolutely terrified. But what was there? Was it something I'd done? Was it, was it something that girl had done that was with me? And I couldn't find answers for that back then. So that set me on a journey, really, of looking for other people who'd experienced something like him, and then predominantly just in the UK. And I did find a number of them. And I think now, all these years later, people are just finding it much easier to make these reports.
And what, because with all the podcasts I've done, they've all been in America, not known a lot about the UK. Now, I've heard a few things here and there, but I think you're the first one who's actually said, I've seen this thing that is here and it takes my surprise that he's here, because before that I didn't not believe, just think
It's
that
impossible. It's impossible for him to be on this island, isn't it? And I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And I have a duty where, because I'm more kind of a pioneer, I stuck my head above the parapet first. I have to answer all of those questions that people have. And many people are surprised when I tell them. I mean, you can look it up. It's on Google. In 2018, the British government put out statistical figures for urban planning. And that's what my background is. That was my profession. And at the time, less than 10% of the UK was urban. And that includes roads, schools, airports, hospitals, the whole 9 yards. 70% of our land is farm, fields and woodlands. And I think because we live kind of in our little areas, and between those areas there are what I call green corridors. So there are, if you follow the river routes, exactly the same as Canada, America and Russia with the Bigfoot, they follow the rivers. They would use them to feed, they would use them for cover and ease of travel. What would they eat? Do they have young? All of these questions are asked. Now, the only evidence I have is anecdotal. It comes from the witnesses themselves. And many people will say that we are maybe a little bit dramatic, or we're exaggerating. The first female I found in the UK that had seen the same as me, her name is Charmaine Fraser. And she actually her profession is in mental health. And the reason she does that is because she was 8 when she experienced something like that. But she did live in the wild. She lived in an area called Camiley in Scotland, grandparents' cottage, in the middle of a huge Sitka plantation. So exactly the place where you think you would see something like that. And she said she was 8. She was going down the farm lane to pick up the post, because obviously the yard's quite far back. So you go down the lane and the postman, a bit like America, the postman leaves your post there. And as she's walking down the lane, the dog suddenly starts to react. Now, that comes up quite often in a lot of reports. The dog starts to snarl and growl. And she said, I looked up, and to my absolute shock, there was this thing standing there. It was about 8 feet tall. It was all brown in colour. And it was examining, almost feeling the twigs or the leaves on a tree. She said thankfully, it didn't turn round, because she would just have been horrified. And just like me, she left that dog. She just ran. She ran. I mean, and she's 8, isn't she? It's understandable. And what got stranger was when we met each other and we were talking, we were finishing each other's sentences because we had so much in common. And she said that her grandparent, one day when her gran was quite old, they were in the cottage, and her gran said, oh, look, there's that ginger ice at the bottom of the garden. And Charmaine said, that what? Those ginger eye folk that you see. So in Scottish, she's saying a ginger, something that goes rah. and it's ginger in colour, reddish in colour. So does grandma know about these things? And I'm incredibly lucky. I'm actually going up there this year to spend a night at the cottage with Charmaine. And we're going to do an investigation in the woodlands where she, around the area. So I want to send a paranormal team in, a UFO team in, a team of skeptics, and a team of investigators. And let's see what each of them get. You know? Yeah, so that's where it started for me, Daniel. And that's why I am so passionate about what I do. Because there's going to be another Debbie out there. There's going to be another Charmaine. There's going to be another thing.
In your research, Deborah, what are people that you've spoken to? Because you said obviously you're from up north, and then you got Scotland. Is it the people you spoke to? Is it the whole length of the country, or is it generally up closer to you?
No, it's everywhere really. Years ago, I used to say put it into counties, and then I realised about the river routes. And I'm going to send you a map across, Daniel, when we finish speaking. And that map has every single case I know on it. So you can look for one around your own area if you want to go out and, do a podcast on that or anything like that.
Yeah.
It tends to be anywhere in the UK. But one thing I have noticed is there are quite a lot of estuaries in the UK, probably about 50 of them. And we get reports all along them. We get very few reports from Ireland, and there are only 5 estuaries in Ireland. And most of the reports are around one loch. So if we're looking at a flesh and blood creature, water is incredibly important as it is to us. We can never be too far from water. I used to think that I'd only find them in the wilds, the wildest places, the Peak District, that kind of thing. But no, I've noticed over the years that quite a few of them are seen on greenbelt land, so land that we can't build on, old mining land, things like that. But we might not be dealing with a flesh and blood creature. If we're dealing with something that's dimensional, it doesn't matter where they are, does it? But when the Americans say to me, there's no Bigfoot in England, I say, that's like me telling you what's in your country without ever visiting. Yeah. That's like me saying to a man in Alaska, well, no, actually, there are no bears there, because I've decided that there are no bears there.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my most famous cases is a chap from Canada, native to the area. He saw a Sasquatch and a moose fight to the death. And he struggled to get anybody in America to actually listen to his story, because they'd already decided that he wasn't in Edmonton. There was no Bigfoot in Edmonton, which is ridiculous if you think. This man's hunted every day of his life. He hunts to feed his family. So we listen to people like that. If he's experiencing something out there that's horrifying, it's not a misidentification. He's a bear guide, so he knows what a bear looks like in very many different situations. And he said, Debbie, this was not a bear. It was upright, and it was on the back of the moose, and it was swiping at the moose. It grabbed it under the chin and it pulled its neck backwards. And you'll have heard that in other podcasts, Daniel, and then brought the moose down to the ground. So what we're seeing there is a very, very intelligent creature.
Yeah. And as I was listening to that story, I base my research up on the Quantock Hills that surround us. And I go on with expeditions with some of my family, and I say to them, there is no way that there's a Bigfoot here to my knowledge. But my mind is open slightly that maybe if we're not dealing with a flesh and blood creature, maybe it could live here. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah. And then we could look at subterranean. All of the UK is underrun with natural and man-made tunnel systems, some of which come up in Tunisia, Bosnia, all across Europe. I think some come up in Turkey as well. So if we were dealing with a creature that is moving through those tunnels, they might not live here. They might come from a different continent. I've taken reports across Europe. I don't think I've ever worked on a case in any country in the world that didn't have some form of hairy, ape-like creature, whether that be tall or small, in their woodlands, often seen as a caretaker of some kind. Or, don't go into the woodlands, he will steal a child or he will steal a maiden. Even going back in time, Daniel, if you look down through England's earliest history, England was named Albion due to that. This is just obviously this is just law. It's not fact. The 3 sisters came here to Albany and they married the giants of Albany, and that's how we get English, Irish, Scottish, and yeah. So that's the Welsh. That's how that's our early history. But for me, I've taken reports that are very flesh and blood. I've seen footprints, I've seen hair samples, but I've also taken reports that are not flesh and blood in any way, shape, or form, where the creature will suddenly appear in front of somebody, or it will disappear, or you can hear it, smell it, but you can't see it. It's completely invisible. It's walking around you, like the big grey man on Cairn Gauns and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you, I always say, I don't know until I sit down with one and have a conversation with it. I am not going to put a human spin on it, you know?
Yeah.
And this, Daniel, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I like that. You have to debunk your own evidence, don't you, if possible?
Yeah. And I know with Dad being on it, he's a bit more skeptical than I am.
I think my role really was when Daniel decided to start a podcast. It was, hey Dad, I'm going to be talking to 2 guys, sat on a rooftop in Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna just be there to have a listen in. And I've always been kind of, I've never had a massive interest.
Yeah.
I am very interested in kind of, the UFO side. But when it comes to Bigfoot, I've always been, I'm not sure. But the more interviews I've sat in on, the more interest I have. And it's kind of this, a lot of the elements of these stories are making sense and connecting. And so I'm very much kind of like, my eyes are starting to become a little bit more open to it. My mind as well. But yeah, I'm that kind of, we have some really, good discussions, me and Daniel, about, and I think that's good. It's good to have someone to kind of debunk and kind of, because then you move forward, don't you?
Yeah, and I really would like to applaud you for that. Because if my parents had done that with me when I was 15, I think some of the fear would have been taken away.
Yeah.
I didn't know if Mum and Dad knew and they were telling me lies when they said there was nothing like that out there. Or even worse, did the adults not know? Just all of those questions that you have as a witness. I'm just looking up the Quantock Hills for you now, Daniel, and we have 2 cases. We have howling in the hills. Now, howling could be a wolf. It could be many cryptids, but we'd never, ever, ever give the witness a word. If the witness says to me that what she saw was an 8-light ghost, it goes down in my file as an 8-light ghost because it's her story, it's not mine. And you have a history in the Quantock Hills of mysterious beasts, big panther-like cats, and monster black dogs, often known as girt dogs. And these girt dogs are like a shuck kind of thing, very muscular animal down on all 4s. And they run all the way back in your history, especially in the Quantock Hills, Exmoor, Dartmoor, and Bodmin kind of way. And then we have, as I said, the girt dog account. Now, the girt dog is also said to roam the Quantock Hills. Yeah, it is said that mothers would allow their children to play unsupervised in the hills, as they believed the girt dog would look after them. So he wasn't something to be feared. He was almost a protector of some kind.
To hear that makes me go, wow, what did these witnesses hear, see, experience? And that makes me really, really interesting. So my next question I'm going to ask you is, do you go on expeditions where you stay overnight in the UK, or do you know someone who has?
Many years ago, after I saw him, I was too frightened to do that. I grew up in we were always outdoors. My dad's fished every river in England, so we were always playing in a woodland somewhere. We camped every weekend. Any time that my dad could get out the city, that's what we did. And that day ended that for me. So I would stay with my grandmother rather than go with them, because there was no way I was ever stepping foot in nature ever again. But in my 30s, when I met my current husband, he was very very supportive and said to me, Deb, you've got to do something about this. You can't be frightened like this for the rest of your life, you know. You've either got to run at it and find out what it is, or just put it to bed, you know, forever kind of thing. And that's kind of what I did. So I did start then doing, I'd kind of immerse myself. I'd do an hour and then I'd try and do 2 hours. It took me a very long time to be able to stay overnight in a tent in the wilds, knowing what's out there and knowing all of the reports that I take on a daily basis, Daniel. So if somebody says to me, oh, do you want to go to, say, Yorkshire? I think, oh my God, I've got 12 dogman cases to watch. But I'm over that now. So what I do is, since my accident in 2006, my mobility is not the best. So what I put in place was, and it's still in place now, I reached out to every witness that came in and asked them, did they want to investigate their own case? I'm not a big believer in experts. I think they've already made their mind up. And 90% of people that come to me have no understanding of how to investigate. And I like that because I think each of them's going to do it from their own point of view. So I have set up, and that's what BBR Investigations is. For instance, if you made a report to me today, I will look on my case files, I will find my nearest investigator to you, and I will put you two in touch. And then you would carry out what you wanted. It might be that you just want to speak to him once and you never want to do it again. All the way through to the fact that you might want to stay there over the weekend. Well, I'll get a team of men together that'll come out with you. And females, you know, we're completely inclusive. So I couldn't, the cases that come in, I get at least one a day. So if you could imagine, that's impossible for me to come down and deal with them all. So I realised early on that I need to manage them. So I give them out to certain people. So that I have experts in dogmen. I mean, not experts, but people who know what to look for, know how to deal with a witness. Basically, dealing with a witness is just listening. Just listen to them and let them get the story out and tell you what it is. So, yeah, we do that. And BBR is completely free. We don't charge for anything. And anybody listening, or yourself, Daniel, who's really interested in getting involved, I can make a note of the area that you're in. You can look at some cases we already have. Or if a new case comes in, I can say, Daniel, I've had a new witness come in. And they've seen something, say, in Taunton. Could you do the case for me? Then that's up to you whether you wanted to do it or not. So that's kind of what we're working with at the moment.
Deborah, did you say you get one report every day?
Yeah, not of the same activity. It might be a UFO report, a dogman report, missing. You know, always.
That's always amazing.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I mapped them, Craig, because I'd never remember them.
Yeah.
They come in so often.
No, of course not.
Yeah, so I pop them on a map.
Yeah.
I'm slightly on the spectrum. I have a condition called Erland syndrome. And Erland syndrome means I would notice a pattern in something before I would notice them. So I had to train my brain to do it differently. But spotting patterns for an investigator is a useful tool. So by mapping them, I thought I might be able to see if there's any roots forming. Maybe it's something seasonal. Is it something that happens every 10 years or something like that? And that map, which is also free, by the way, anybody can use it, has just turned into something where people go, oh, I love that map, Deb. I like to just read the reports. Or other people have actually started their own YouTube channels by going around and visiting these areas that I've reported on. And I'm really keen on doing that going forward, Craig. Just anybody that's interested, to me, I'm more than happy to take the time to sit down with them and have how many chats it is that they need, because we need lots of different opinions, lots of views, lots of skill sets. That's what we need, you know, as an investigation team. And I'm incredibly proud that I've been able to set that up.
And it's an amazing resource for the whole country. So, you know, you should be very proud of that. That's incredible that you're getting to a point where people are contacting you, you know, one a day, when it's something that's so personal to people as well. Because, you know, when I assume I haven't had any sort of experience like that, but when you have that experience, it must be quite daunting as well, because how people are going to react, and for them to trust you with that information and moving forward, that's a big credit to yourself.
I think I got a very good advice from a friend many years ago, and she said to me, Deborah, be the researcher you needed back then. And I thought,
That's brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, so that's always how I've done it. And each time I felt like, right, I've done it now. I can close my books. I can retire. I get another email from somebody. Absolutely. I'd like to give you a little example of how it can be for somebody. So one of my friends who's from Wales, he's my friend now. I didn't know him before the incident, but many of my witnesses end up as personal friends. He worked for, I can't actually say where it is because we need to keep it secret, but let's just say he's a civil servant and he is from Wales. So when he finishes his work at the end of the day, he stands at a certain bus stop that is outside a woodland he played in as a child, and he goes home. In 2020, he had a serious accident where he broke one of his legs and his arm. So during that time and COVID, he didn't get out at all, and he was really missing the woodland. You can get quite depressed stuck in when you're not able-bodied. So his friend said to him, "Don't worry about it. Pack some sandwiches, make a flask. I'll set you up there in the car. Just sit in the woods, listen to the birds. And when you're ready, just message me on your phone and I'll come and pick you up." All very normal. And he sat there on this log and he said, I can feel myself finally really relaxing after like 18 months and thinking, what's my future going to be now? And this thing stood up at the side of me, Deb. It was on my right-hand side. It stood up on two legs. It was a wolf. It had a dog's face and a dog's head, ears on top of its head, no tail, not paws, hands and feet. And it just looked at him, and just walked away. So then he said to me, I cannot go back to work. So he's on sick then. He's on sick for months and months and months. So I worked with him. He's managed to find a different job in a different area. He's moved into a different flat. So he's happy in that sense. And then now what we do is we get him back into the woodlands. And whether that means me going down there with him and going in, or getting one of my team to go in there with him, or he can put me on FaceTime while he's doing it, so that we can get him back to where he was before the incident.
Yeah, it's really important for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, have you ever done any research in other countries?
Yes. I've been very lucky there, Daniel. Really lucky. In the early days of Skype, back in the olden days, and MSN and things like that, you could actually reach out to Bigfooters in other countries. And I live in an area of the UK which your dad will remember, CB radios. So I live at
very much, yeah.
Yeah, the huge. I actually live where there's a huge transmitter. So back in the day, I'd go up with my husband and we'd sit in the car and 1919, anyone seen Sasquatch? 1919, anyone seen Bigfoot? And I started to network with people all across the globe. I've worked with the leading hominologist in Russia, Igor Burtsev. I've done a lot of work with Igor. He's looked into the missing ape woman, Zana, that you've probably heard of, Daniel. And she was taken in the 17th century and she had a number of children. And he's got the photographs of the children. He's got Zana's skull. So I was incredibly lucky to work with him on that. And I've worked with some of the real big names in Bigfoot. And just gathering information. I just wanted to get whatever information I could to try and explain away what I saw. I started this hoping that I'd come across something and go, oh, well, that's what it was. It's nothing. I can walk away from it. And I've never been able to do that in all these years. I'm 56 now, and it happened when I was 15. And it's still that prevalent that it's every day because I work it as a job now,
Yeah. Have you had any other sightings since then of any cryptid at all?
Me, no, and I don't want to have another sighting of a cryptid. I'm going to be really honest with you. No, I don't want to see him or any cryptid again. Some people have multiple experiences with them, and some people, like myself, it's a one-off event in your life. It must have lasted 10 seconds, but that 10 seconds is scored into my brain. I eat and breathe it. It's what I do. At first for validation, really, so just to prove to people that I wasn't a liar. I did actually see this thing, and I'd be a fool, wouldn't I, to put 45 years in for nothing on something I'd made up. And I'd be really good at planning stuff. I must have known in like 82 that Bigfoot was going to become massive in the 2000s. All of those things I'm accused of. I'm just an ordinary girl who's looking for answers into what she's seen. I think I've had a close encounter with one, though, that I didn't see. I told you that I was worried about going into the dark and things like that.
Yeah.
I realised that where I lived, my home, I'd go out, my daughter would go down there, and we found these strange set of footprints that went through the swamp. And obviously I couldn't follow them, but my daughter did. And they came up at my back fence at the back of my garden. And that absolutely terrified me, I'll be honest. And I've got the photographs of the prints. I can send them to you. And
yeah, please do.
Yeah, at the time I was trying that thing where I could stay in the dark. So it'd start off, and I'm in my wheelchair at this point. So I could stay out in the dark for 5 minutes and then I'd go back in. And I'd have the 2 dogs with me. And, you know, my hubby had light a little fire for me in the pit. And we'd try and do it like that just so I could stay out longer and longer. And I got myself where I could get right down the path. And at the back of my back fence, it's just open fields and woodlands. There's nothing out there. And I'm sat there this night and I think I've done it. I've absolutely cracked it, you know. I'm over my fear and everything. And I heard this thud on the other side of the fence. And my dogs left me for dead. The dogs they would never do that. I wheeled myself up that garden backwards with all the fear I could. And I heard this noise, and this noise went, "Oof." And there's nothing in the UK that can make that noise. You know?
Wow.
So that's as close as I've come again after it, and that's as close as I want to get.
Yeah.
Apologise for the dogs barking in the background as well. Just on that. But just okay. So this is a bit of a strange question, but you know, you're saying that you don't want to experience that again. And obviously, your reaction when you were 15 was possibly not how you would react today.
Yes.
So how would you react today? And I know that's a really strange question, but let's say, you know, with all your now experience and knowledge and research, let's put you in that situation again. What would you do that was different today compared to when you were 15?
Absolutely everything. I've taken over 4,000 accounts across the world, and in not one of them is there a physical or violent attack. In 99% of my cases, that creature will meld back into the greenery or will walk off into the woodland. It will often flail its arms around and make a huge, you know, distraction to get you out of the area. Stones will be thrown, howls and whoops, and trees will be shaken. That tells me that that's a creature that its first instinct is not violence. It's incredibly intelligent because it's doing a distraction technique. I hope if I saw it again that I would glue my feet to the floor, no matter how frightened I was, and really look at it, ask some questions of it. I'd love to be hypnotized and go back to that day. I could see it without fear, and I could probably get a better description of it. You know? So I would, Craig, I really would try to like be as brave as I could, but instinct might take over and I might run up, you know, screaming again kind of thing. I don't know. But I've spoken to police officers who've seen them, soldiers. There isn't a typical witness. They're all different and all unique. But I do find that the best investigators are the kind of people that what I would call neurodivergent. So we don't fit 100% with this 2023 world. We view things differently.
I think that, you know, I'm sure Daniel won't mind me saying, but Daniel's autistic, which I think that has really boosted his interest in something like this.
Yes.
And I think that quest for an answer and a quest for a full stop is something that kind of you know, drives him as well. And like you were saying earlier about patterns and stuff, he just loves looking at this sort of area. But it also comes with that thing of the thing that's absolutely amazing and brilliant, which is he doesn't care what other people think. And that's, you know, that's just brilliant to me.
It was the same for me, I think. I think I'm one of those girls that it doesn't matter what you say to me. I really don't care. I'm not interested. You weren't there with me. You weren't stood next to me. So you've got no opinion on it either way, to be honest. But I like the fact that Daniel's curious. He hasn't already made his mind up. And that research is fluid, Craig. So you might have one idea when you start off, and in 20 years' time, you've completely changed your mind. That's how we learn as humans. We need to make mistakes. We need to... I want to see the inner workings of everything. My brain needs to know how it works. I can't function any other than that. So that's my skill set. Daniel has a unique skill set because nobody looks at the world like Daniel does.
Exactly.
nobody looks at this subject like Daniel does. He will probably, like me, could name every, in Philadelphia, I listened to a podcast on this. That's kind of what my brain does. So
Yeah.
it would be a waste for me and Daniel to not use our skill sets.
Yeah.
They're unique to us, and I absolutely love that. I love a lone wolf. I'm more than happy for anyone to say, "Oh, Deb, I don't mind what anyone says. I'm just really interested in the subject. I just want to learn." I can work with that all day long.
So my last question for you is how can our listeners follow your fascinating work?
I have made it incredibly easy for everybody. I just go under my name, Deborah Hatswell. And if you want to get in touch with me, deborahhatswell@gmail.com, all lowercase. I will send you a link over. Obviously, I have podcasts and they go out on all of your podcast sites, and they are just under my name, Deborah Hatswell, BBR Investigations, as is my YouTube channel. I'm quite easy to find, and if you put Bigfoot, Deborah Hatswell UK, I will pop up, no doubt. But it doesn't matter to me where you are in the world. If you want to share something with me, or you've got some information that you need, just reach out and ask me. Might take me a couple of days to get back to you. I'm a very busy woman, but I will definitely get back to you. And if you need me to come back on, Daniel, if you've got any more questions for me on any
absolutely.
other subjects that I cover, just get me back on. And I can recommend some really decent, really, really decent witnesses and investigators that you might want to interview as well.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I will see you guys in the next podcast. Thank you very much. And
amazing. Well done. Thank you, Deborah.
Deborah,
No, not at all.